Before today's video starts, we want to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, Untitled. Thanks to the ongoing pandemic, we really have no idea what's going to happen over the next few months. Many of us could be stuck at home fighting what seems like never-ending boredom. So why not ensure you have something fun to do at home by getting a Untitled subscription? Untitled is awesome for an inexpensive and safe game night at home. Untitled is a bit like an escape room in a box. Each box contains clues that you need to sift through and decipher to figure out the bigger puzzle, which is the identity of the killer. Untitled props are amazing. They are such high quality that they look like they came from the set of a TV show or a movie. One of my favorite things about Untitled is their storylines. They are absolutely riveting. I played Untitled with my friends, and we would even discuss the case when we weren't playing the game. And of course, we always look forward to the arrival of the next box. Check out Untitled yourself by going to untitled.com/criminallylisted and use the promo code criminallylisted to get 20% off your first box. Once again, make sure you use the promo code criminallylisted. Get Untitled today so you have something safe, unique, and fun to do at home, and you'll also be supporting Criminally Listed. Do you have what it takes to hunt a killer? Number 3. Maria Honzell. In February 1977, Janie Kusleka was living with her two sons, who were 8 and 6 years old. They lived in an apartment in a 2-story walk-up building complex in Colorado Springs, Colorado. At the time, the apartment complex was on the north edge of the city. On February 7, 1977, Kusleka called 14-year-old Maria Honzell and asked her to babysit that evening. Maria lived in the apartment building next door. Maria accepted the job. Maria called her best friend and asked her to come babysit with her. Her friend's mom said that she couldn't because it was a school night. Sometime after dinner, Maria went over to the apartment to babysit. Between 8:30 and 9 p.m., Kusleka called home and spoke to Maria. Kusleka got no sense that anything was wrong. Sometime after the phone call, the eldest Kusleka boy got out of bed. He saw that there was a young man in the apartment. He looked a little bit older than Maria, possibly around 17 years old. He was white with scruffy hair and acne. He was wearing a fluffy blue down jacket, jeans, and black sneakers. When the boy saw the young man, he was putting his hand over Maria's mouth. Maria screamed, "Stop it," several times. Then they went into the master bedroom. After that, the boy went back to bed. Janie Kusleka arrived home at about 11:15. She found nothing out of place and nothing had been stolen. In the master bedroom, she found the dead body of 14-year-old Maria Honzell. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest. Neither of her sons were harmed. The police found no signs of a break-in or forced entry. The police believe that this indicates that Maria knew her killer. Or, at the very least, she was comfortable letting him into the apartment. Maria's body showed no signs of sexual assault, but the police do believe that the murder was sexually motivated. The police investigated Maria's friends and any possible boyfriends she may have had. But this line of investigation did not lead to an arrest. The police did have one promising suspect. He was never publicly identified, but he was arrested after Maria's murder in Rhode Island for the murder of another girl. He was living in Colorado Springs when Maria was murdered, and he left the city shortly after the murder. The police never had enough evidence to charge him with anything. The police do have a sample of Maria's killer's DNA. A profile was created from the DNA in the mid-2010s, and it was uploaded to the Combined DNA Index System, which is known by the acronym CODIS. However, no match was found. If the police do have the killer's DNA, they can use forensic genealogy to hopefully identify the killer. The detectives who are currently assigned to the case have vowed to keep working on it. One said if he has to, he'll keep investigating until he goes to his grave. But the family and friends of Maria Honzell are hoping that the killer will be identified long before that. Number 2. Heather Kullorn. In July 1999, Heather Kullorn was 12 years old, and she lived in Richmond Heights, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis. Heather was described as boisterous, outgoing, and independent. Her mother said she was 12, going on 30. Heather adored children, especially babies. She would often play school with her younger cousins. On July 10, 1999, Heather started staying at the apartment of 34-year-old Christopher Herbert and 23-year-old Dana Madden. The couple was friends with Heather's family. Herbert and Madden had a 2-month-old daughter, and Heather was staying with them so she could watch the baby at night. On the night of July 15th, Heather was alone in the apartment with the baby. Madden left the apartment at 10 p.m. to work the night shift at a 7-Eleven convenience store. Herbert left the apartment around the same time to go party on the banks of a nearby river. Herbert said that he returned to the apartment at 4 a.m. and he heard the baby screaming. He checked in on the baby and she was okay. But 12-year-old Heather was not in the apartment. Herbert called his girlfriend, Dana Madden, and told her that Heather wasn't there. Madden called the police. The couple's apartment was searched, and the police found some unusual things. The apartment had a basement, and in the basement, they found some drug paraphernalia. Specifically, they found items that were used to manufacture methamphetamines. The police also found some blood in the apartment. Tests were conducted, and it was determined that it was Heather's blood. A neighbor of Madden and Herbert got in contact with the police. He said that at around 2 a.m. on the morning Heather went missing, he was outside with his dog. He saw a man carrying a child who was about Heather's size out of the apartment. The top half of the child was wrapped in an off-white comforter. The child was barefoot. It turned out that an off-white comforter was missing from Madden and Herbert's apartment. Unfortunately, the neighbor either didn't get a good look at the man or couldn't recall what he looked like. Sadly, no trace of Heather Kullorn has ever been found. The police suspect she was murdered. About 6 months before Heather went missing, she was diagnosed with diabetes and she needed daily injections or she would go into a diabetic coma. Heather's mother, Christine Kullorn, is sure that Christopher Herbert and Dana Madden know more about Heather's disappearance than they have let on. In April 2000, 9 months after Heather's disappearance, Christine and her sister went to the 7-Eleven where Madden worked. They confronted Madden and demanded to know what happened to Heather. Madden maintained she didn't know anything about Heather's disappearance and told Christine and her sister to leave the store. They refused to leave and the police were called. The police ended up arresting Christine and her sister. Christine was charged with disturbing the peace and she was released on a $100 bond. The police believe they know what happened to Heather Kullorn. The apartment where she disappeared from had a garage. The police believe that, on the night Heather disappeared, she saw someone or several people manufacturing methamphetamines in the garage. She was then killed to make sure she didn't go to the police. The police had over 100 people who they thought might have been involved in the methamphetamine ring. They have eliminated all but a dozen people. The police have said that those dozen people have refused to cooperate with the investigation. As a result, the case is considered cold. Although the police believe that Heather Kullorn has been murdered, Christine Kullorn still holds out hope that her daughter will be found alive. If Heather is still alive today, she is 33 years old. Number 1. Donna Frislie. In 1962, 14-year-old Donna Frislie lived in Lancaster, California. On the night of February 12, 1962, she went to a home in Lancaster to babysit 3 young children. The children's mother, Barbara Christensen, was divorced. That night, she was going out on a double date. Donna arrived at her home at about 7 p.m. and Barbara left for the evening. This was the second night in a row that Christensen went out on a date. The night before, she had gone out with a different man. At around 1 a.m., Donna called the man that Christensen went on the date with the previous night. She asked him if he knew where Christensen was. The man told her that he didn't know. About half an hour later, Christensen's roommate returned home. She found the doors to the house unlocked. The children were in their bedrooms, but 14-year-old Donna Frislie was gone. When Donna didn't come home, she was reported missing. The police believe that she was kidnapped. In the home where Donna was babysitting, there were several of her possessions. This included her purse, $1, a dime, her cardigan sweater, and one of her shoes. A radio had been knocked over. The police conducted a massive investigation, which included a door-to-door search, and they searched areas outside the city. They interviewed friends of Donna, and they also talked to sex offenders who lived in the area. But they found no trace of 14-year-old Donna Frislie. On February 16, 1962, about 4 days after Donna went missing, a commercial airline pilot went to the police. A flight attendant had found something odd on a plane that flew from Los Angeles, California to New York, with a stop in Las Vegas, Nevada. What the flight attendant found was a copy of the February 14th edition of the Los Angeles Times. The newspaper was printed the day after Donna was reported missing, and there was a story about her disappearance. The man had circled Donna's name several times. He also wrote several things on the newspaper in pencil. The writing was not very legible, but it's believed he wrote, "I get away. I'm not afraid to die. About myself, I don't know what I'm doing. Defense is due for me. Sheriff, launching officers." And he also wrote the number 30. The story about Donna's disappearance started on page 1, and it was continued on page 21. Page 21 was missing from the newspaper found on the airplane. The flight attendant said that the man got off the plane in Las Vegas. The flight attendant could not remember much about the man. She said he was well dressed, and she described him as being between the ages of 30 and 40. The airline tried to identify the man, but they were not able to. The police were never able to determine if the writing on the newspaper had anything to do with Donna's disappearance. On February 20th, 1962, 7 days after Donna went missing, two amateur prospectors were in the Mojave Desert. They were in a remote area that was about 22 miles east of where Donna was babysitting. They saw something sticking up out of the sand. They thought it looked like a human foot. They went towards the foot and kicked away some sand. When they did, they saw some blonde hair. They then went and called the police. The police came to the area and they determined that the men had found the body of 14-year-old Donna Frislie. She had been stabbed once in the back and her throat had been slashed. There were no signs of sexual assault. The police believed that the killer was familiar with the area. Donna was buried about 6 miles from the nearest main road. It had recently rained in the area, and this led to part of the body being uncovered. The police did find tire tracks near the burial site, and they were hoping it would help solve the case. But sadly, no arrests were made in the wake of the discovery of Donna's body. In fact, no one has been arrested in connection with her murder. At the time, it was suspected that Donna was not the killer's only victim. The media speculated that the killer had murdered 2 other women. The first murder happened 11 months before Donna was killed. 19-year-old Mary Netherlane lived in Oxnard, California. Oxnard is about 100 miles southwest of Lancaster. On the afternoon of March 4th, 1961, Netherlane went to a movie theater. The movie ended at about 6:20 p.m. Where she went after the movie theater is a mystery. About 3 hours later, her dead body was found by some ranch hands at a lemon orchard about 3 miles from the movie theater. She had been stabbed 4 times in the chest and twice in the neck. She had also been hit in the head with a piece of concrete. The piece of concrete was found near her body, but the knife was never found. The medical examiner said that the cause of death were the stab wounds. The police believe that Netherlane was killed elsewhere, and then the killer dragged her body from a vehicle into the orchard. Netherlane's clothes were not askew, and there were no signs of sexual assault. Also, Netherlane's purse was found near her body, so it's not believed that robbery was the motive behind the murder. 11 months later, Donna Frislie was kidnapped and murdered. Less than 2 months after Donna's murder, on the night of April 3rd, 1962, 22-year-old Kathleen Dodd was at home with her young children. The Dodd family lived in Ventura, California. Ventura is about 10 miles northwest of Oxnard and 97 miles away from Lancaster. Shortly before midnight, a man got into the Dodd home through an unlocked door. Once he was inside, he grabbed a knife from the kitchen. He forced Dodd to walk out to a set of railroad tracks that was about 1,000 feet from her home. At the railroad tracks, he sexually assaulted her. Afterward, Dodd ran to a nearby house. The man chased after her and caught her. On the driveway of the home, the man stabbed her multiple times and slit her throat, killing her. Dodd's husband said that about $60 was missing from their home. While there was speculation that the 3 murders were connected, the police did not have a suspect in any of the cases. On April 28, 1965, 3 years after Kathleen Dodd was killed, another woman who lived in her neighborhood was murdered. 60-year-old Mary Eaton was killed in her home. She had been stabbed multiple times and her throat was slit. Some money and jewelry were stolen. 2 days later, 20-year-old Ernest James Akins was arrested for the murder. Akins first got in trouble with the law when he was 11 years old. He lived with his mother 2 blocks from Eden's home. He became a suspect in Eden's murder because neighbors saw him near Eden's home around the time of the murder. It turned out that Akins had given Eden's rings to 2 young women he was dating. The police were also able to connect Akins to the murder of Kathleen Dodd. Akins lived just a few blocks from Dodd. Several people remember that Akins was broke and unemployed at the time of her murder. But not long after the murder, he showed up at a craps game with $60. People also noticed that he had a scratch on his face in the days after Dodd's murder. Also, a jacket he normally wore went missing after the homicide. And finally, Akins confessed to at least 5 people that he killed Dodd. Akins was subsequently charged with the murders of Eden and Dodd. As the police were building their case against Akins, they found a piece of evidence that connected him to a 3rd murder. In his possession was a photograph of a woman. It turned out that the woman was the daughter of 41-year-old Clyde Hardaway. On June 7, 1962, Hardaway was shot to death in a park in Ventura. His wallet, which contained the photograph, had been stolen. However, Akins was never charged with Hardaway's murder. Akins went to trial for the murders of Eden and Dodd in January 1966. He was found guilty on both counts. Akins was 16 years old when he killed Dodd, so for that murder conviction, he was sentenced to life in prison. For the murder of Eden, he was sentenced to death. But then, in 1972, the California Supreme Court outlawed the death penalty. Akins' death sentence was then commuted to life in prison. So, was Ernest Akins responsible for the murders of Mary Netherland and Donna Frislie? The police do not believe so. The 3 murders that Akins committed happened in Ventura, whereas Netherland and Donna were killed in Oxnard and Lancaster, respectively. Also, Donna and Netherland's bodies were moved with a vehicle, and Akins didn't have a vehicle. In fact, all of his victims were found where he killed them. Also, Akins stole something from all 3 of his victims. But nothing appeared to have been stolen from Netherland and Donna. It's unclear what happened to Ernest Akins after his sentence was commuted to life. However, he is no longer in the California prison system. The murder cases of Mary Netherland and Donna Frislie are considered cold, and they are largely forgotten. It is not known if they are connected. Sadly, after 60 years, it is doubtful that either will be solved. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, if you are looking for something new to watch, why not check out my new channel, Chapter Dark. The videos are mysteries that you can try and solve. Do you have what it takes to solve these mysteries? You can find a link to Chapter Dark in the description box below. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.